Welcome back to the Caribbean News Flash channel with me, Andrew Tucker, and I am live this morning, and I'm here to give you commentaries based on Hurricane Melissa that seemed to have devastated Jamaica last week. Now, we know that the storm was on its way, even though it was making lots of turns and people were not sure in terms of where it would have landed in Jamaica. But eventually it landed on the southwestern section of the island, and we know now that the storm has wreaked complete devastation in places like St. Elizabeth, Montego Bay, Hanover, Manchester, Mandeville, that area, and perhaps I think also I've heard of Falmouth, Trelawney, St. Anne. We've been hearing about very, very, gruesome and depressing and we have been circumstances, and we've been seeing these very heart-wrenching images coming out of Jamaica, and we wonder if Jamaica is a country at war when we look at the images. And what I'm very concerned about, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that our media, our global media, including our local media, seem to be falling what they're doing. What they're doing is they're just going there and they're reporting. And I was happy this lady yesterday was responding to a Fox interview and she says, yes, so what are you here for? How can I help you? I need help. Instead of coming to speak with the people, I think the people are intelligent to understand that this is not just about interviewing them and making and getting views from, their misery and the disaster, because that's what we call disaster capitalism, in which the oligarchs are making billions of dollars from people's misery. We saw that in Haiti. We saw that during Hurricane Helene, or after its passage in North Carolina. We saw that during the fires in Hawaii. So if we think that we have not learned our lessons, we saw that during the pandemic. And we have still not yet learned our lessons. When are we going to open up our minds and our hearts to accept truth, even though it is the unvarnished truth and it is rather painful? But we must not really trust and confide in government. We ought to hold them accountable, and we ought to be skeptical of everything that they do. Not, when I say skeptical, a healthy dose of skepticism. That is what we need to have. So we look at everything they do and we put things together. And I think that we have not yet learned to do that as a people. Our brains are not functioning in the way it should be functioning. And dare you say things are this way and you're certain that these things are not happening and stuff like that. Okay, very important that you understand that you must question everything and don't reject even theories that sound crazy, because we're living, in fact, in a crazy world. And what you think it sounds crazy, looks irrational and illogical might be the very thing that you ought to be looking at. And that is what critical thinking is all about. Those people who study science and any other subject per se understand this. Things that look like this might not be the answer winds up sometimes or wind up being the answer to the very um, question or problem that you were seeking to solve. And I got up this morning and I was reading the Gleaner and I saw Michael Abrahams, of all persons, suggesting that when some people are questioning whether or not, and I'm going to make a video on that, whether or not this hurricane was a man-made disaster, oh, that could not be. He thinks that that is a far-fetched idea. This is the same Dr. Michael Abrahams who got everything wrong during the pandemic. And he himself had to come and say that he's not even trusting science anymore. He says he's finding it very difficult to trust the medical journals because he realized that he was bamboozled. The same Michael Abrahams realized that he was bamboozled about everything that happened during the health emergency 5 years ago. But yet he's willing now to say that he won't even consider that the hurricane could have been man-made, could have been a man-made phenomenon, because we're all buying into the climate change rubbish. Okay? So he can't see through that. And I'm not suggesting that he should. What he should understand is that, okay, I'm not seeing it now, but I'll do more reading, I'll do more analysis about it. But the same thing he did during the pandemic, I'm not seeing that. It can't be that it is a man-made phenomenon. It has to be natural. Okay? And then he saw that it wasn't. And not to mention the joke that came afterwards. I have to use that word, and of which he was very well in support. And then he realized that it was not necessarily what he thought. Right? And this is what we have a society which is not cemented in critical analysis and learn how to question everything. And the things that we think, as I'm saying, even medications that we take, sometimes the simple medications are that which work. It looks simple, it looks irrational to the mind who might have gone through medical school, but that is the antidote to whatever health issue that you might encounter. We're living in a society in which people do not like to question, and they think their indoctrinated minds and brains will permit them to do further research. But that is because you're indoctrinated. That is because your mind is already controlled. So you're not able to broaden its horizon and to think much more deeper and broader. And that you cannot ask Jamaicans to do. Whether they're coming from UWI, they're coming from the upper class, so you just hear a lot of nonsense, even among the so-called educated class. And the inability, I should say, the incapacity to challenge the government that something needs to be done now, and stop pussyfooting and saying that, oh, we can't get to the communities because of what. Listen to what the Gleaner is reporting this morning. Okay, the Gleaner is reporting this morning. Relief angst, hundreds desperate for aid as 25 communities still marooned a week after hurricane. And there's a picture here of Colonel Charles Jr., Minister of Labor and Social Security, as he addresses a special press briefing on the recovery from Hurricane Melissa at Jamaica House in St. Andrew yesterday. Almost a week after Hurricane Melissa delivered a catastrophic blow to sections of southern and western Jamaica, the government reported yesterday that there are still 25 marooned communities. 25. Now, if you know that they are marooned, why don't you get there? You are able to know that they're marooned. How do you know? How do you know that there are 25 marooned communities? Because you might have done an aerial. Get the supplies to them. The fact that you know that they are marooned and 25, you know the specific number. It means, therefore, that you are in cahoots, government of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, with the sufferings of our people. The fact that you know, it's one thing not to know because of human frailties. But the fact that you know that they're marooned, get it to them. There are equipment that is able to do it. And if you have to call Australia, if you have to call the United States to get them to get you the equipment, so you can get it over to them as fast as possible. They believe, after all, in climate change. So shouldn't they have the climate change wherewithal to get these things to people? What's the sense of talking about climate change? What's going on here with my thing? What's the sense of talking about climate change when we don't have the equipment? Look at the housing that Jamaicans were even building, those flat houses, which I spoke about last year on my Rumination News Network. Okay? Those flat houses. I don't know what this is, but why this is getting so smeared on my thing here. Okay. Yeah, those flat houses that we have been making. Okay? Flat. And then what do we expect when there's flood? Okay? So I would ask Dr. Andrew Holness to get his act together, and Colonel Charles. You can get the supplies to the people if you so desire. Jamaica is a small country, a small space, and the fact that you're able to tell us that 25 communities are marooned is because you know. So get things in place to get the supplies to them. Okay? Now, as the cry for food, water, and other items of need gets louder in communities that remain inaccessible, the administration is unable to give a specific timeline as to when the life-saving supplies will be delivered to those facing the pangs of hunger and in need of other critical packages. Now, the fact that the Gleaner is using these very loaded terminologies, life-saving supplies. So if they're life savings and you can't give a timeline, it means therefore that people are going to die in the hundreds, if not in the thousands, with the complicity of the Jamaican government. What a wicked set of people we are. Right? And people are asking me, oh, which country do you know has been able or was able to solve the problem after a catastrophic hurricane? I don't have to tell you a country. Jamaica is small. And if you're comparing it to the size of let us say, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, a small little rock in comparison to these islands. And these countries, Puerto Rico and all these countries, even the United States, different states carried Katrina in Louisiana. Okay? These countries are not the standard because we see where that the government was ineffective also. Because the same dark forces which control these relief supplies are the same forces that are going to control the supplies in Jamaica. Jamaica is not functioning on its own. It is functioning in the realm of a global agenda. And that is what you have to understand. Under the banner of disaster capitalism, in which these multilateral institutions are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the misery of people. And that is why we see wars being waged all around the world, because war is a racket. Okay? And a lot of these natural disasters or man-made disasters are also a racket. And that is what we've got to understand. That is what we've got to put into our cranium. But many of us would rather be ignorant and, under the disguise that we have education and we are critically thinking people, right? When you look at the Gleaner and see the foolishness that people write in that country, you really wonder if we have an educated class in that country. And the commentaries coming out of Jamaica are so uncritical of what is happening that you really wonder if that country is even civilized anymore. I don't think so, right? The Marooned communities are located in the parishes of Westmoreland, St. Elizabeth, St. James, and Trelawney, and one in Hanover. So they know. They know these communities. They are aware of these communities. So why not get the supplies to them? If you know, it means that you know. It's another thing if you don't know, you did not know. Then we could say, human frailty. We're not omnipresent, and in fact, there are communities that might not be recognizable, right? But this is not the case. They know, and yet still they don't have a timeline. They haven't got a timeline in terms of when these life-saving support or supplies will get to the people. What a piece of nonsense. Speaking during a press briefing at Jamaica House in St. Andrew yesterday, Labour and Social Security Minister Colonel Charles Jr. said every effort is being made. Okay, is that true, Colonel Charles Jr.? I don't think that is true. Being made to get supplies such as food, water, and tarpaulin to the persons who are marooned. There is no country in the world that could have suffered what we have suffered and respond in 1 day and 1 week. Yes, you could. And stop comparing yourself to other countries, because Jamaica is a tiny country. It's a tiny country. So we do not need to compare ourselves with other countries in the world. Okay? We don't need to do that. Tiny country. And if we're sat down, we knew it was coming. And we, according to us, we are so much climate change and how much money we have, probably the IMF might have stolen from us to put into the climate change fund. So why didn't they buy equipment, understanding that a catastrophic, hurricane or even an earthquake, we should have learned from Haiti, which is a much bigger country than Jamaica, with a bigger terrain. Okay? And we are now, another Haiti is in the Caribbean. Another Haiti is upon us, and our politicians are shameless. The images coming being fed through the international media. Right? They don't care. But Andrew Holness is on TV at all the TV stations of the world, pretending to be a king or a prince. I don't know what he is. He said the Jamaica Defense Force on Sunday went into a number of areas, including Compton in St. Elizabeth, Spring Gardens, and another in Trelawney to deliver relief supplies. So why they can't go to the marooned communities? Get there. This should not be any excuse. Right? And they're just there, moving slowly as if this is something normal. Right? What a country. And what a world in which we live. And people like to compare themselves with the lowest common denominator. So you're going to compare yourself to what happened under Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Helene, as if the people were not complaining that the government was irresponsible. And they knew that the government could have lent them help, but decided not to do so, and allowed their own people to have suffered the pangs of hunger and destitution. Yet we want to compare ourselves. We like to compare ourselves. I've been saying that on my channels. Jamaica likes to compare itself with the lowest common denominator, people of the lowest common denominator. And that is why we can never prosper as a country, because we're a wicked set of people. And all this voodoo that you're glorifying in, okay, that is going to also wreck the entire Jamaica that we live in. Because our people are so evil in our thoughts, as the Bible says, that in the latter days, or during the time of the antediluvians, every imagination of their thoughts was evil continually. They thought evil continually. This is what we're going through. And the Bible says, as in the days of Lot, so shall it be in the time of the end. People are not thinking, they're no longer their brother's keeper. As Cain said, am I my brother's keeper? Okay? Now, if you allow these people to die, government of Jamaica, Dr. Dana Morrison-Dixon, I hope you're listening to me, and Colonel Charles Jr., if you allow these people to die, you would have been complicit in their death, in their deaths, I should say, and the blood will cry out from the land of Jamaica, and more destruction is going to come upon our people, including you yourselves, for doing such an evil sort of, relief. Okay? What's happening? What is happening in Jamaica? Why aren't we our brother's keeper? Why are you telling me that there are 25 communities marooned? How do you know that? Because you've been there, or you've done an aerial view of them. Okay? So get the supplies to them. Whether you have to drop it, whatever. Drop it. Fly low and drop it if you can't land. The people need to eat. They need a place to live. And they need, as you're suggesting, life-saving supplies. Get it to them. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you'd like, share, and subscribe. And make sure that you send this video along and send it to Andrew Holness so that he can hear my voice, because I am, in fact, very angered by what I am seeing coming out of Jamaica and the heartlessness that is coming out of our leadership. Disgusting.